Virtual data centers are revolutionizing how businesses operate. But here's something wild. Experts estimate that by virtualizing their infrastructure, companies are reducing their energy consumption by up to 80%. That's like taking 3.6 million cars off the road each year.
Those numbers are staggering when you think about it. And what's even more fascinating is how quickly this transformation happened.
You know what's interesting? I was reading about the history of computing, and just 15 years ago, most companies were still running their own physical data centers. The shift to virtual infrastructure might be the biggest change in enterprise computing since the internet itself.
That reminds me of something I learned recently. Before virtualization, the average server utilization was only about 15%. Companies were basically paying for machines that sat idle 85% of the time.
That's like having a fleet of cars that spend most of their time parked. Speaking of efficiency, let's break down what exactly makes virtual data centers so revolutionary.
Well, before we begin diving into this topic, let's start with welcome to Technically You, where we make tech make sense. Today, we're diving into something that has been changing the landscape of enterprise IT, virtual data centers, or VDCS.
Let's start from the top. What exactly is a virtual data center?
A virtual data center is a pool of cloud-based infrastructure resources, compute, storage, and networking that are abstracted and delivered as a service. It mimics a traditional physical data center, but is hosted entirely in a virtualized environment.
Right? And it's typically built on virtual machines, VMs, and software-defined infrastructure like SDN, software-defined networking, and SDS, software-defined storage, orchestrated through platforms like VMware, vCloud Director, or Microsoft Azure.
Exactly. A VDC allows businesses to scale up or down their data center resources based on demand, all without touching a single server rack.
So, let's break it down. What's happening under the hood? How do virtual data centers work?
At the core, VDCs rely heavily on virtualization. Hypervisors like VMware, ESXi, Hyper-V, or KVM abstract the physical hardware layer and allow multiple virtual instances to run on a single physical machine.
Then, orchestration tools like vCenter, OpenStack, or Kubernetes come in to manage resources, allocate capacity, and automate tasks like load balancing, backups, or even disaster recovery.
And let's not forget about software-defined firewalls, VPNs, and cloud-native security baked into the virtual layer. This brings us not just flexibility, but also granular control over security and compliance. Speaking of security, that's probably the biggest concern I hear about when discussing virtual data centers. How are companies handling that?
The latest research shows that virtual environments actually have fewer security breaches than traditional data centers. Modern virtual data centers use something called microsegmentation. Think of it as having thousands of secure rooms instead of one big warehouse.
That's fascinating and completely counter to what most people would assume.
So, here's the big question. Why should a business care about all of this? Why are virtual data centers important?
One word, agility. In a fast-moving digital economy, deploying new apps, expanding infrastructure, or recovering from outages in minutes, not weeks, is a huge competitive edge.
Also, cost efficiency. You're not over-investing in hardware you might not fully utilize. With VDCs, you pay for what you need, when you need it.
And let's talk about business continuity. Built-in geo-redundancy, high availability, and automated failover mean your services keep running, even during major outages or disasters.
Exactly. Virtual data centers have achieved 99.999% uptime in recent years. That's less than 6 minutes of downtime per year.
Plus, it supports hybrid and multi-cloud strategies. You can integrate workloads across public, private, and on-premise environments seamlessly. Those numbers are impressive, but let's talk about the environmental impact you mentioned earlier. How exactly does virtualization lead to such dramatic energy savings?
So this is where it gets really interesting. Traditional data centers waste enormous amounts of energy on cooling and power conversion. Virtual data centers can dynamically allocate resources where they're needed, which means less wasted energy. Recent studies show that for every kilowatt hour saved in computing, you save another kilowatt hour in cooling costs.
And I imagine the hardware efficiency must be significantly better too.
Oh, absolutely. Modern virtual infrastructures can achieve utilization rates of 80% or higher, compared to that 15% you mentioned earlier. But here's what really blows my mind. The latest AI-driven management systems can predict and adjust resource allocation in real time, leading to even greater efficiencies.
That brings up an interesting point about the future of this technology. Where do you see it heading?
The trends are fascinating. We're seeing the emergence of what some experts call autonomous data centers, systems that can literally run themselves. Machine learning algorithms are getting so sophisticated that they can predict hardware failures before they happen and automatically migrate workloads to prevent disruptions.
That sounds almost like science fiction, but it's happening right now.
And here's something even more mind-bending. Researchers are working on quantum-inspired optimization algorithms for virtual data centers. These systems could potentially manage resources millions of times more efficiently than current methods.
You know what's interesting about all this? It's not just about technology, it's about changing how we think about computing resources entirely.
That's such an important point. We're moving from a world of owned resources to one of accessed resources. It's similar to how streaming changed how we consume media. Nobody thinks about owning DVDs anymore, right?
That's a perfect analogy. And just like streaming transformed entertainment, virtual data centers are transforming business operations.
Let me share another surprising statistic. According to recent industry reports, by the end of 2025, more than 85% of enterprise workloads will run in virtual environments. That's a complete reversal from just a decade ago.
The speed of this transformation is remarkable. How are IT professionals adapting to these changes?
That's actually one of the most interesting aspects of this shift. The role of IT professionals is evolving from hardware managers to service orchestrators. They're spending less time fixing servers and more time optimizing business processes.
And I imagine that's creating new opportunities in the job market.
Absolutely. The demand for cloud architects and virtual infrastructure specialists has grown by 300% in the last 3 years. But here's what's really interesting. These roles require a completely different skill set than traditional IT jobs.
That must be creating some challenges for organizations making the transition.
Definitely, latency can still be an issue, especially for workloads that are latency sensitive. Vendor lock-in is another concern. You get too embedded in one ecosystem, and it's hard to migrate.
Also, while cloud providers offer tools, visibility, and control can be limited compared to on-prem environments, but this area is improving. You need strong monitoring and security policies in place.
The benefits far outweigh the challenges. As we mentioned earlier, companies are reporting that their IT teams can now deploy new applications 90% faster than before. And when you consider that time to market can make or break a business these days, that's huge.
These changes seem to be affecting every aspect of how businesses operate.
They really are. And here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Virtual data centers are enabling entirely new business models. Companies can now experiment with new ideas without massive upfront investments.
That kind of flexibility must be particularly valuable in today's fast-changing business environment.
Exactly. And speaking of change, let's talk about resilience again. During recent global disruptions, organizations with virtual infrastructure were able to adapt much more quickly than those with traditional setups.
That's a crucial point about business continuity.
And it ties into something even bigger, the future of work itself. Virtual data centers are making it possible for companies to operate globally while maintaining local presence and compliance.
It sounds like we're really just at the beginning of understanding the full impact of this technology.
That's right. And as we wrap up, here's something to think about. Virtual data centers aren't just changing how we manage technology. They're changing how we think about business possibilities. When computing becomes as accessible as electricity, what new innovations will we see?
That's a powerful thought to end on. It really makes you wonder what the next decade will bring.
Indeed, it does. And for anyone listening who's still skeptical about virtual data centers, remember this. Every major technological shift looked optional at first until suddenly it became the new standard. This is one of those moments.